today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping. You lost another tanker? I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. Hunt for Red October may not be the best movie ever made, especially when you compare the movie to the book. The book is obviously much better. However, it has some of the most quotable lines, I think, for any movie. I will hold this movie up with almost any other one out there. It has some great ones. You may recall earlier this week we did a video where we discussed the front falling off of two Russian tankers. That was my homage to Clark and Daw, the great routine in which they talked about the front of a tanker falling off. Well, now we have a third tanker. This is the 109. Went down just north of the Kerch Strait. We have approximately about 8,000 tons of oil that is now in the water. We've had loss of life on one of the vessels. So we're going to go back in, take a look at this third tanker that went down, and also discuss what this means. There's some new evidence out about these vessels, and talk a little bit more in general about Russian oil tankers and what's going on with that industry. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. Here's a story over at gCaptain by Reuters. Third tanker sends distress call as oil washes upon Russia's Black Sea coast. Spilled oil has washed up along tens of kilometers of the Russian Black Sea coast after two tankers were badly damaged in a storm at the weekend. A regional official said on Tuesday, and state media said a third ship is now in trouble. The video I had at the very beginning showed you the Volganov 109 sinking in the Sea of Azov. 8,000 tons of oil are going to have a huge ecological factor in the region, as you see here with marine life. The scope of this spill is unfortunately very large. We're seeing images come out of Russia showing it washing up on the beaches. This is obviously a very heavy form of oil that's coming ashore. It's not like diesel. This looks almost like a heavier distillate or a crude of some kind that's coming out. These ships, as depicted above here, the Volganov, the 109, the 212, and the 239, are designed for river traffic. This is an image of the Volganov 239, very typical of ships during this period of time, built by what was the Soviet Union. Today it's Russia. These ships are roughly about 50 years old. They are designed to navigate the river system of Russia, so they tend to be narrow, long, and squat, with very kind of shallow bottoms on them, designed to carry oil. One of the interesting features about these ships is we believe both the 239 and the 212, these are the two that sank out in the Black Sea, had been shortened. Actually, sections of the ship had been cut out of them and the sections reattached together. And this is not uncommon with tankers. We think the reason for shortening the vessel was that so the ships could pass IMO, International Maritime Organization, licensing so that they can operate outside of Russia. These ships are currently only registered to operate within the territorial waters of Russia. They can't really go into the territorial waters of any other country. They're not classified to do that. And one of the problems with the ship was the lack of longitudinal strength. Longitudinal strength is strength along the length of the vessel. So the keel, the top of the tanks, and longitudinal supports through the ship provide that strength to the vessel. These tankers, and you can kind of notice it here in this image just a little bit. Now she's loaded at this time, and so the ship's on a fairly almost even keel here, but when the ships are empty and they come up out of the water, these ships have a pronounced what's called hog. The bow and the stern section will sit lower than the center section, and the reason ships are designed for that is when you put the weight on them, especially a lot of weight associated with oil, that weight pushes down on the vessel and actually strengthens out the vessel, evens it out, because it is the center section of the vessel displacing all the water that creates the buoyancy. So the 239 and the 212 were outside of the Kerch Strait in the Black Sea itself. The 109 was inside the Sea of Azov. And one of the reasons we think that the two vessels were outside the Kerch Strait had to do with issues stemming from the Russia-Ukraine war. Talked about this the other day. Russia has been fortifying and increasing defenses around the Kerch Bridge. This is the bridge that connects the Crimea Peninsula back to Russia. It's also the dividing line between the Sea of Azov and out into the Black Sea. Now, the vessels, the two tankers, the 239 and the 212, normally operate within the river system of Russia. However, they were outside of this, south of it. And it raises the question, why were they out of this? And one of the potentials is they're transporting oil to either be loaded into tankage ashore, so that it can be loaded for export onto larger tankers out through the Black Sea and the Turkish Straits, or they're going to be doing ship-to-ship transfers. Now, they could do that within the Sea of Azov. However, because of Ukrainian attacks in and around the area, the Russians have been fortifying this region. This image from Naval News shows you barges being put in place along with layers of defense so that the bridge, this is the section of the bridge right here where it's got the highest point. This is where deep draft vessels come through right here. You can see these barges being put in along with wires and ropes between them to try to prevent Ukrainian unmanned surface vessels from hitting it. This is the section right here that was damaged by a truck bomb back in 2002. This image comes from H.I. Sutton's Covert Shores. It shows you the impact of the gale. I really wouldn't want to call it, anything more than that. It was a substantial storm that came through the region, but a gale is about the level you want to call this. You'll see that some of the barges that were in and around the Kerch Bridge have been moved and some are missing. We're not sure if they've been sunk or just moved. We do see a deep draft vessel coming out under the bridge at this time. These barges could be moved periodically to allow passage during that time. Down here, this is the southern shore of Russia. This is the Kerch Strait. This is Crimea up here. This is Russia. This is the northern Black Sea. Here you can see the bow section of Volganov 212 ashore. The stern section is nowhere in sight, and we don't know where the 239 is. We believe it's somewhere in this region. And then north up here in the Sea of Azov, we see the 109. This is the third vessel that just recently sank. These ships are not without problems. This is a sister ship to the three vessels that sank back in 2007. You'll notice the ship broke apart here at the bow section. It snapped in half and broke. That's a good indication of problems with the stress of the ship, that the ship would snap in that place. We believe both the 212 and the 239 broke in that same way based on the videos I showed the other day. So I want to come over here to marine traffic and show you the track line of the Volganov 239. This is not recently. This is actually from January 1st of 2021 to December 31st of 2021. I went back to 2021 because that is pre-Russia-Ukraine. Russia invades Ukraine in February of 2022. And you don't quite get the accurate tracking of vessels because some of the Russian ships turn off their AIS, their automated identification system. And here you see the track of 239 over the course of the year. Runs all the way up from St. Petersburg in the northern part of Russia, down the river system. Again, a very extensive inland waterway system. This is literally the same river system the Vikings used to sail down into the Black Sea to go sack Constantinople 1,000 years ago. And then the ship will sail all the way up and down the lower end here on the Don, on the Volga, and actually out into the Sea of Azov. And for a brief period of time, it is actually at the Kerch Strait. This is the same region where it sunk. And it kind of confused me because I went back and did the track run for the 109. I did it for the 212. And in all three of those cases, the ships are out here. But it's all at the same time, October of 2021. I came across this, a closure of the Black Sea in October of 2021 because of war maneuvers going on among all the different sides in and around the region. The Russians were conducting it, the Turks, the Ukrainians, the Romanians, the Bulgarians, and I believe that they were doing a test of themselves in operating the ships in and around the area to get them out and offload fuel into the area. They could have been doing refueling of naval vessels. They could have been practicing ship-to-ship transfers. They could have been operating in and around the ports. There's information put out on these vessels in a publication called Podyum, which talks about these ships. These ships are Project 1577 oil tankers. They're designed for use on the coastal river system of Russia. As I mentioned before, they underwent modifications so that they could be used outside the area. There was an attempt to shorten the vessels and get them approved for use by the IMO, but that failed. Both these ships were rated for seas much under what they encountered. So, for example, the 212 was rated for seas up to 2.5 meters, the 239 for seas up to 2 meters. We believe they encountered seas of anywhere from 3.5 to 5 meters. And that is way above their limit that they're designed to handle. And because these are smaller vessels, they don't have the length, they don't have the width, and they don't have the depth, what begins to happen is that type of sea lifts and raises the ships quite a bit, and with a heavy load on board, without the buoyancy being provided as you're lifting and dropping that vessel, you start kind of exasperating the bending motions. And what we believe happened, at least in the case of the 212, the 239, and probably the 109, is that they snapped. They basically broke their back and fractured at one of the tanks. It appears to be that most of them will do it up forward. These ships were supposed to not be in the weather out there, out in the Black Sea. However, Ukrainian attacks on one of the local ports prevented the ships from offloading and doing either their discharge ashore or in the ship-to-ship transfers. And that's what got the vessels in trouble. Now, I also want to highlight the fact that Russian tankers and the Russian petroleum industry has a lot of other issues going on. It's not just the loss of these 3 tankers. If you don't follow the channel on a regular basis, we talk about this quite a bit, but there's several issues facing Russian petroleum discharge right now. It's one of the reasons why we saw river-sized tankers operating out in the Black Sea. So one of the things that's happened with the Russian invasion of Ukraine is the ending of the import of natural gas into Europe, which hasn't happened, actually. The Europeans love to say it, but it hasn't happened. Europe is still importing natural gas. Now, some of the pipelines have been shut down. Nord Stream has been shut down because of the sabotage to 3 of the 4 pipelines. However, some of the overland pipelines and an underwater pipeline through the Black Sea are still transmitting and shipping natural gas to Europe. However, a lot of natural gas also comes by ship, but it has to be liquefied. And this story over at gCaptain by Mike Schuller, Russia's Gazprom makes the first LNG delivery to Italy amid shifting European energy landscape. Europe is still importing quite a bit of liquefied natural gas from Russia. In this case, it's getting them from the Baltic-based LNG facility. Russia is also opening up new forms of exports, in this case ammonia, and it's ramping up its exports. So the first ammonia sea terminal at the port of Ust-Luga on Friday, this is on the Baltic Sea, aimed to increase export facilities opened up. And ammonia is one of the big fuels now that are being exported. There's a great potential for Russia to make money off it. Denmark is also warning Russia that it may start sending warships to escort Russian oil tankers. Now, there's an issue going on since the Russian invasion of Ukraine where the United States, the G7, the European Union countries, and other countries have sanctioned Russian oil. And the sanctioning is a weird sanctioning. They basically sit there and say Russia can export oil and diesel, but it has to do it under a certain price level. And the way that price level is enforced is through insurance companies. Basically, the Russians can't get insurance through the 12 big insurance companies that insure vessels if it goes over a certain cap. Well, the Russians have avoided that by either not getting insurance or getting insurance through new companies, largely ones they set up. Well, now what we're talking about here is that the Danes may want to set up a policing stop through those regions to stop the ships, to inspect them, to make sure they have legitimate insurance should something happen. It's going to be a bit dicey because you're interfering with the innocent passage of vessels. I'm very harsh on the Houthis for this, but I don't expect the Danes to be shooting at ships, and particularly I don't expect the Danes to shoot at wrong ships, much like the Houthi do. Then you have this, an insurance checkpoint ahead. The European countries are talking about setting up a checkpoint to ensure this. So 12 European countries are getting set to clamp down on this. So it's not just going to be the Danes, but you're going to see a resurrection of the old Hanseatic League, it appears. And they are going to be wanting to inspect ships to show proof of insurance. This is like a DWI checkpoint, driving while under the influence in the United States. And then you have this crackdown on the Shadow Fleet. This is the fleet of vessels the Russians have taken out of the normal registries, outside the normal insurance, and are operating it in parallel to other commercial vessels. But with this insurance companies they get, they can haul oil above the price cap. Well, the UK is leading the global crackdown on this Russian Shadow Fleet with a series of new sanctions. But they are not alone. The European Union has expanded their sanctions through their 15th package of restrictive measures, and they have added 52 new vessels to this blacklist. In other words, not allowing these ships to operate in the waters of the European Union. And it goes even further in that they're targeting some of the newest ships in the Russian fleet. So here you see the EU imposes the first ever sanctions on Yamal gas project targeting the Christophe de Margerie LNG carrier. This is a ice-strengthened liquefied natural gas carrier that is essential for the Russians for getting liquefied natural gas out of this Arctic field out into the marketplace. So there is a great deal going on with Russian tankers. I know the attention seems to be on these three river ones that sank, the Volganov, the 239, the 212, and the 109. However, we're seeing Russian tanker fleets being sanctioned by the EU and the G7. We're seeing issues up in the Baltic with them. We're seeing issues in the Arctic with them. And we're seeing issues with Russian ships going through the Red Sea and bribing, actually, the Houthi to sail through that area. It is an amazing time to be watching shipping. And if you're enjoying this, then let me suggest, hey, why don't you take a moment and subscribe to the channel? Click on the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as it comes out. Leave a message, share it across social media, and if you can, give it a big thumbs up. I hope you enjoyed today's video. It was great having you on board. If this is your first time with the channel, you can follow us on all the social media platforms. I got links in the show notes down below. We're also streaming our videos a few days later on Spotify as podcasts. Until our next video, this is Sal, signing off.